Let's give Mr. Ormsby a round of applause. Thank you, Mr. Ormsby. Please rise for the hymn and the Pledge of Allegiance. All people that on earth do dwell, to the Lord with cheerful voice, serve him with his praise forth tell. All come before him and rejoice. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, in liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. I love that. Love the singing, love the saying of the pledge, and thank you for some of you who provided leadership today. Really appreciate that. Good morning. Good morning, 7th grade. Good morning, middle school. Great to see you all. How was your long weekend? Good? Very good. All right. So as you all know, today marks the beginning of our second semester. As I had mentioned in my letter in the Schoolhouse News, means that we are at the halfway mark. That's pretty remarkable, right? Seems like we only began the year not too long ago, and we've completed half the year, and we have another half year to go. So my encouragement to you is to take the learnings of the first semester and apply it from day one of the second semester. Don't wait until the next test. Don't wait until the next quiz. Today is day one of the second semester, and this semester provides an opportunity for a fresh new beginning. And I know you're all fired up and want to do well and finish this year on a high note. So I encourage you to just follow through with your desires and your commitments so you can really perform and do as well as you would like to do, right? Because you set the standard for yourself, and I really encourage you to pursue those things. All right. Any other announcements? Very good. All right. So this morning it is my very special privilege to introduce our chapel speaker, Mr. McManus. When the head of school speaks to middle school in particular, that is something that's quite rare. And I've worked at different schools, and so I hope you're all ready to hear Mr. McManus's message, and I know you're in for a treat. As you all know, this is Mr. McManus's second year at Montgomery School. Any school leader or any head of school who comes into any school it's hard, right? But to come during the pandemic and to be able to kind of set the tone for the school, it's pretty remarkable. In my eyes, these people are really superheroes, and Mr. McManus is one of them. I know there are a lot of things that we all can say about Mr. McManus, but the one thing I would say is he is a visionary. What does that mean? A visionary is someone who sees the potential of a place or a person and then provides a goal or a dream to get to that place. So when Mr. McManus came to Montgomery School, we have this beautiful 60-acre campus. We've been doing some amazing work here on campus for many years, and he came and saw things that we hadn't thought of before. And he pointed us to those opportunities that we have right here on our campus, right here in the middle of all the wonderful things that we do, to take what we do to the next level, right? And so that's what a leader does. And so Mr. McManus is certainly a gift to Montgomery School, and this morning we are delighted that he is going to speak to us. So let's put our hands together for Mr. McManus.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez, for that, frankly, over-the-top and too generous introduction. I'm just happy to be here, particularly this morning. I kind of just rushed in I had to drop off my preschooler in Wilmington, Delaware, and get up here, and I'm so glad I made it. All right, good morning. Good morning. Congratulations on starting second semester. I am going to start with some very important tone-setting questions for you. What do you call a Siberian Spider-Man? Peter Parker. If Spider-Man's secret identity is Peter Parker, what's his dog's secret identity? Yes. What's Spider-Man's favorite brand of rice? Yes, thank you. Why did Spider-Man quit his day job? He was tired of being a web developer. This isn't going to end. Why does Spider-Man have such good comebacks? Because with great power comes great responsibility. If Spider-Man suddenly runs out of webs while he's chasing bad guys, what is he called? Peter Parkour. What if the latest Spider-Man was from London instead of New York? They would have called him Kilometers Morales. A few people in the know. How does Spider-Man find the definition of words? The Webster's Dictionary. Thank you, Mr. Anzaldo. Would an evil alternate universe Spider-Man be a bad parallel Parker? Okay, all right, good. As my family knows all too well, I stumbled across a podcast that is 100% dad jokes, and yes, I fall into dad joke territory big time, in addition to being a school leader. So I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry to subject you to that. I thought to myself, what's a better way to start second semester than with some wordplay? It's a dark time of year. Bright things are on the horizon. It's time to talk about some fun things. Today's chapel is about windows and mirrors and about how we learn, and it's all actually wrapped up in just a passion of mine, which is Spider-Man, comic books, and, as you'll hear, someone special in my life. When I was about 11, until the age of 16, I was a huge comic book fan. Now I'm a big comic book fan, but I was a huge comic book fan. I was very intense about it. It started within the pharmacy downtown, the Sherburne Pharmacy, where I grew up. There was like one of those revolving racks with all the different comics on it. And I would pick one up and I'd be like, what happens next? But I couldn't figure out how to get the next issue. And I was like, there's a story here. I want to be part of this story. So then I found out that there was this place called Newbury Comics, which was actually in Boston, but they had one in the town next door, and I would go there. And then I graduated to subscriptions. Like you order a magazine, I would have comic books arrive in my mailbox. So once a month, new issues of X-Men, the New Mutants, Captain America, the West Coast Avengers, and others would show up at my door depending on how many funds I had available to buy these subscriptions. I asked for subscriptions for holidays and birthdays. I did yard work to get big trips to buy annuals. Annuals are like the hardbound ones, once a year, back issues, just wanted to know everything. It's been so awesome to see the Marvel movies for me because the producers have been really true to some of the core stories of the characters, but of course they're retelling them, which is what comic books are all about, right? It's the same stories kind of over and over in different ways, and some of the fun after you've watched a lot of it or you've read a lot of it is like, oh, I see. I think that's what might happen, and then there's like a little subtle change. So comic books are like this large body of literature, and since I've spent a lot of time with them, I thought I would take you through a couple of my favorite spots. This Christmas, my family, knowing my passion for this, got me this cool book called All the Marvels. It's written by pop culture critic Douglas Wolk. Actually, he was a music critic most of his career, and he made it his journey to read every single Marvel comic. So this was a multi-year project because they've been around a long, long time. And it produced the resulting book. And what he did was he couldn't recount everything that happens in all the comics, but he picked out like 6 core storylines that happen. And so it's been interesting to sort of dive in and go back to some of the stories that I knew and some of the stories that I didn't, and what's most important about those characters. Now, Spider-Man has been sort of ubiquitous. I never actually had a subscription to any Spider-Man, but Spider-Man stories were everywhere. And growing up, there were a lot of cartoons. This is Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, featuring Firestar and Iceman. They were roommates. You can imagine the hijinks they got up to, crazy things that happened. They're both mutants, by the way, and they're way different ages, but I digress on that. The story of Spider-Man in every generation and every iteration is based on a single coming-of-age story. It's about this one person who grows up and, like some of our iconic stories like To Kill a Mockingbird or Harry Potter or even Great Expectations, these are all cultural stories about being young and going through this time of growth. In literature, they call these stories sometimes by a German term, and I'll see if I can pronounce it right. Bildungsroman. Bildungsroman. It's a novel about the moral and psychological growth of the main character. Bildungsroman. Impress your English teacher with that one. Pull that out. So Peter or Miles is always young in the stories, always making mistakes, always hurting the ones that he loves, and always trying to grow up into the best he can be. That resonates with just about every person in the world because we're all supposed to grow up. And we all feel the consequences of our actions and the choices that we make as we become adults and we become responsible for our own choices. And of course, when I was your age and I was reading these comic books, that was really resonant with me. I was seeing a mirror of myself in the stories. I looked at it and I said, oh yeah, I relate. I've been thinking about Spider-Man a lot because my family went like kind of crazy. Last summer, my wife, after years of not watching any Marvel movies and never having read any of the comics, said, I'm going to watch every single Marvel movie, and made it a mission all summer to watch every Marvel movie. So now she's as big a fan as anyone in the house. And so we had to run out and see the new Spider-Man in the theater. So it's been on the brain. And I thought about all this time teaching English, which I did in high schools and working in schools, and this idea of windows and mirrors. So the mirror when you see yourself as a character in the text, and a window when you get to lean in and look in to a world that's completely different than yours, and the experience of a character that's different from yours. And both are essential for us as we enter the world. We want to be reassured. We want to know what we're going through is something other people go through, but we also need to see what's possible and to see the experiences of other people. And what's cool and enduring about these Spider-Man stories, and of course that's Into the Spider-Verse, is that they're told today in more and more ways, right? You can see it's not just Peter Parker, old Peter Parker with the coffee cup there. There's Miles Morales now. There's Spider-Gwen, right? There's different mirrors maybe that we can get into this particular story. And representation matters, but windows also matter. For me, as a young teenager outside of Boston, it wasn't hard to find stories with people who looked like me and who had similar experiences. Maybe in part that's why I, like seemingly everyone reading comic books back then, fell in love with these guys. The X-Men. They weren't like me. In fact, many of them weren't men at all. Oh, I'm sorry. This is the original X-Men. They were actually a little bit more like me. To be clear, I'm actually talking about the Uncanny X-Men, written at the time by an author named Chris Claremont. The original X-Men seen here became much more interesting over time. But in 1963, they all kind of looked the same. They had one woman on the team, and sometimes they just referred to her as the girl on the team. P.S. That's the same Iceman, 25 years separated and somehow the same age. this is not how it's supposed to work. In the early days, Jean Grey, the girl, she was kind of this afterthought. And they did actually fix that in a huge way because she became extremely popular and she became this all-powerful character called the Phoenix, heroically saving her teammates. That storyline's one of my favorites. If you're looking for one place to start with the X-Men, pick up the Phoenix, Dark Phoenix. I am now in a very deep, geeky hole, and I'm going to try to climb out. Okay, these are the X-Men. The Uncanny X-Men. They look a lot different from the originals. Chris Claremont famously would ask the creative team, they would say, we could have a character that did this, and he could be like this, and he could do that. And he would always say, and why couldn't this character be a woman? And so there were a lot more women on the team. The Uncanny X-Men had Storm, with Mohawk here, without Mohawk many times when you see her. She could control the weather. Kitty Pryde could manage her own molecules. She could walk through walls. Rogue had to wear gloves because if she touched someone, she absorbed their memories and their powers, and she basically like sucked that person away. And there were many others throughout the stories of the X-Men. There were also men, but they too were, well, different and had challenges. The men included Colossus, who could sometimes get stuck in his metal form and couldn't be a normal human being. We had Nightcrawler, who was mocked for his blue tail and skin, and Wolverine. You guys know Wolverine? Yes, heard of Wolverine? Hugh Jackman in the movies. Every time his claws would come out, he would cut his own skin. It would hurt every time. But he had healing powers, so it got better. But he was always angry. So, did I mention also that their leader and teacher didn't have use of his legs and was confined to a wheelchair? All these different perspectives, all these different experiences that I didn't have. These X-Men were twice, 3 times different. Figuring out who they were in society. They were from Russia, they were from Germany, they were from Kenya, Canada. They are still in the stories, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, Buddhist, agnostic. For me, it was a look into a larger world that helped ignite my love for reading and literature. I know some eyes are probably glazing over. You're like, enough with the comic books, Mr. McManus. But the stories and the life that was there made me think, where else could I find stories like these? And was a good partnership with the other kinds of reading that I came to do. I also think that when you're 12, 13, 14, you can't help but wonder who you'll become and what you can be. The X-Men always reminded me that the best question is, what do you see that is special in yourself? How can you team up and share it with others to do something good? By stepping out of my comfort zone and seeing the world through someone else's eyes, I can imagine new things for myself. So, windows and mirrors. Windows for me, Spiderman. The X-Men, mirrors, Spiderman. Which brings me to a final thought, and now I'm so glad I have 7th grade because you're a bigger group. I need a favor. Throughout my life, I've taken inspiration from many people, and I've had friends who have served as mirrors, who reflected back to me important things about myself, and I've also had friends who've been windows into what that could be. One friend who has done both is my sister, Claire. I want you to watch this. How does my sister figure into what we've been talking about? To begin with, she's kind of a superhero. Here we go.
What are we doing today?
So today we're doing an acupuncture treatment for mobility and for increasing digestion. The main points that we're using are on the very distal or far part of the turtle's right forelimb. Even though the turtle's issue is in the shoulder, we're using these points to open up the fascia, which is the connective tissue, and to help increase circulation and hopefully decrease inflammation in the shoulder area. And as you can see, it doesn't hurt the turtle at all to do this.
Let's hear it for the team that put Typhoon back in the warm waters. A Kemp's Ridley turtle trapped all the way up in New England on Cape Cod before the cold snap, when the cold water comes in, is basically dead. So for someone to find it and say, we have to help this turtle, and the turtle was obviously not strong enough to survive on its own, so into the New England Aquarium program it goes, and who do they encounter but Dr. Claire McManus, my sister, one of many, many people who worked with this turtle, but those were her hands, and that was her voice there, giving acupuncture to a turtle. There's very few people in the world who know how to give acupuncture to a turtle. My sister happens to be one of them. I'm not sure if she's the only one. She's actually created a lot of charts for animals for acupuncture that hadn't existed before. And the story for that is that she's an animal lover, and she treats her own dogs and pets. So one day she was at the dog park, and someone's dog was having trouble, and she said, oh, I do this for my dog. And he said, oh, could you do that for mine? And so she just gave a little acupressure, and the dog, kind of responded, and he said, actually, I work at the zoo. Would you come look at a couple of our animals at the zoo? And so she was invited to the zoo. And then the New England Aquarium heard about her and said, we have some penguins that have arthritis. Could you come over and help us with that? And so one thing led to another, and to another, and to another. For you, seeing that, hearing that, you're like, okay, Mr. McManus, Dr. Claire McManus has always been Dr. Claire McManus. That's the only Claire McManus you've ever known. That's who she is and who she always has been. But to me, there's a multiverse of Claire. I have seen her as a rock bassist with a mohawk like Storm's, as a magazine editor, as a farmer, as a maple tree sugarer, something you do when you work up in New England, a frontier health worker, a camp leader, a stand-up comedian for a time, she's very funny, and an acupuncturist. And then becoming an animal acupuncturist. I've mentioned her a couple times in chapel. There she is. And I'm hoping, I've asked her, if she'll come talk at some point to all of you about her latest work. What she does is really interesting. But mostly she's been on my mind because it's her birthday this week. So here's a favor I want to ask of you. Could we do our Montgomery birthday for Claire? Sing really loud. There's a bunch of you. I'll try to step away so she can get your voices on the microphone, and then I'll send it to her. I'll send her the video. Yes? Okay. We'll say Dr. Claire. Happy birthday to you. That's the intro. Here we go. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Dr. Claire. Happy birthday to you. Without an opportunity to look in windows and see what's next, Claire might have come to the conclusion that the only thing that she could be was the one thing she was seeing in the mirror about what was next. And I think that's true for all of us. We always have to be looking out to see what's possible. And one of the ways to do that is to do the things you love, immerse in the things you get geeky about, really find out everything there is to know. Love what you love, and look through the window with curiosity. Thank you. Thanks for bearing with me. I'm happy to consult on any comic recommendation needs you may have. Have a great week and a great semester.